which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by recognizing our superintendent. Ms. Shostak, you have any comments or anything to make? All right. And then we'll move on to the agenda. Item 2.1, discussion or action concerning the review of budget recap and timeline.
Yes, the budget recap and timeline is attached, and it's basically almost the same thing you've seen before. We're on the second board meeting scheduled for today, March 29th, and they have the listed funds that we'll be going over tonight. There is an optional meeting on April 19th, if y'all should choose to have that after tonight's meeting. And based on those two meetings, the final of all budgets will be presented on April 24th for a final review before we go into public advertising that's required by law, for an adoption date of May 10th. It's listed as optional, so we'll just get direction from the board and in this meeting if you want to have the April 19th meeting or not. We just have it as an extra placeholder in case there were something that we couldn't resolve or questions we couldn't answer that the board felt strong enough to have another meeting on, and that'll be totally optional. Any questions?
Yep. Move on.
Next item is 2.2. It's discussion or action concerning preliminary budget report 23-24 general fund budget, summary projection, revenues, expenditures. That spreadsheet is attached. First of all, we start with the revenues, which the notes do talk about the projections and how those came about to a total projected revenue of $335.6 million. Followed by that, we have the amounts to be allocated to general to cost centers and schools. So after that, on line 43, we have different requests that we came up with after the rollover budget occurred. So I don't know, did y'all want to? Do you have any questions, or how do you want to cover this? I don't want to be too brief or too extensive, but. So are there any questions on the revenue side? Nope. Any questions on lines 43 through 72, which are the adjustments to the rollover budget? Starting on line 91, we have the cost centers. So what we do, we go, we close the system in January and we copy everything over and roll it over. Then we give a chance for all cost center supervisors to go in and make adjustments, move stuff around. Then they have a chance to do a proposed increase or decrease, which goes to review by the superintendent and staff. And that gets put into the system and rolled forward to the projected 23-24 budget, which then we determine if we have a surplus or deficit, and we meet for a number of days, make administrative adjustments to come out to, at this point, a slight surplus of $40,164.
Good.
Thank you. I have a question for Miss Hurley, if she's here. I see her in the back. On on, well, I guess I don't know what line it is. This is line 96, Miss Early. We have a almost $2 million increase to the insurance administration line item. Is that, and the footnote at the bottom says increased property and casualty premiums, I guess?
On Louisiana or Lafayette Parish school system being a tier 1 hurricane area, the market said, underwriters said, hey, you're looking at this huge increase. Matt and I actually had some very productive meetings with many of our underwriters and differentiated Lafayette Parish school system and where we're located and what we've done and the fact we've never had a loss before. So we actually were able to decrease that. Initially, my note is incorrect. That's what they originally had said. It would be that large increase, and it's actually, we decreased it to closer to 600,000 in premiums and for the property piece.
Can you come and do my homeowner's insurance for me, please? Because mine took a pretty big jump as well. Okay, so and part of my question was, so we're going to market every December, just
Well,
trying to plan not just to see what the prices are, not necessarily to change our coverage.
Right. I go to them and say, okay, hey, what are underwriters saying? What's the reinsurance market doing? And they come back to me and they somewhat give me moderate to worst case scenario. So when I put numbers in for the budget, I'd rather you guys say, okay, this is what it is, but look how much better we've done instead of being hit hard. And there were so many property losses last year. There's some school districts that are seeing 200% increases.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you, Ms. Early.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Mr. Angel? I have a question or
Yes, sir.
two. I understand that you're moving quite a few, let's call them remediation or summer programs. You're moving some of those items from general fund to ESSERS. So I'd like to know how much money are you moving from general fund into ESSERS? That's the first question.
Did you want to? We're tracking that currently. We're trying to reconcile the list, but it's, I guess at this point, about 3.2 that I'm aware of. But there's things in ESSER that's not coming back, and things that. So I think what we're going to spend this year doing with administration is reviewing what was effective, and what was less effective, to see how to gauge what the general fund needs to cover next year that possibly got moved to ESSER.
So did I hear you say that there's roughly $3.2 million being moved from general fund to ESSERS?
Currently, I believe,
Oh.
no. We're still working on that number.
No? Yes? No?
So we have moved some things from general into ESSERS. We're saying in ESSERS right now, we have about 3.2 million. Not all of that is coming into general next year.
Now, obviously, I'm concerned about the year after, when ESSERS begins to diminish.
And we've had
I know that
extensive-
you're planning to
Right.
do some deep dives and try to figure out what's effective. I just would appreciate some ballpark figure about how much money are we talking about in terms of having to deal with in a year from now.
From what we're seeing, we're looking at about 3.2 million in the current ESSERS that will expire, that will have to come, that we will have to evaluate and make priority. And it may be things such as with ESSERS, we were able to do K through 12 summer school, which we've never been able to do. We understand, and we know that it's important, and we want to do that as long as we can, but that's just one thing where we may have to go back and just say, okay, go back to the way we were doing 5 through 12. So with Ms. McGee, we have been having several meetings and evaluating and moving some things out, eliminating some things that will end in September 2023. But we're doing extensive planning so that it's not a hard hit in general fund. We realize we'll have to let go of some things that we have had the benefit for children,
Sure.
for them to have as far as for extended learning and so forth.
So maybe as you guys work through those conversations, at the appropriate time, maybe advise the board on, there's going to be a $500,000 hit to the general fund budget in the following year, that kind of thing, so that we can budget mindfully for these changes in funding.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Mrs. Centetti?
I don't see Mr. Oliva here. Is there anyone who can speak to the $1 million increase in vehicle maintenance?
Yeah.
It's
How did
a
that happen?
Kyle?
50% increase with a footnote that says increased parts and I guess labor costs, but seems quite large.
Yes.
Good evening, members of the board. Kyle Bordlawn, Director of Planning and Facilities. We've had a drastic increase in the cost of parts. Just a year to a year and a half ago, some like circuit cards that go in these buses might have been $300. Now we're having to pay $700 and $800. That's just an example. But the parts have really skyrocketed on us.
Okay.
Mr. Dugas, is that the cost center that we've had to move money currently
Yes.
to just make it through the end of June?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And that request was cut by 220.
About 220, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Move on.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry, Mr. Booth?
Thank you, Mr. President. All of that, those dollars are not towards maintenance of the Camping World or that facility at all?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No, both that and utilities and fuel. So we've seen, of course, as you've seen in your own personal budgets, increases in utilities and fuel. And I think what's happened in the past is because the budget was rolled over in January, the old number would come over into the budget historically, and then they would run out of money in March or April, and then they would be in my office, and we would be scrambling to find money to pay for gas. But then it never got readjusted because it got rolled over at the wrong amount. So we went back and adjusted some of that because this year they started running out in February. So we knew ahead of time that we needed to adjust that budget before it rolled over so that the number didn't increasingly get worse. So the same problem kept coming up year after year. So we tried to address it by putting money in there, the money that they need to get through the year. We actually put that in there so that this year they're not going to be coming to me in March. And that money was already in the rollover. But that's why you don't see such a big increase in fuel, because that was already incorporated in. It was a bit more of a surprise for the bus maintenance.
I'd like the superintendent, if you would, walk us through the staffing changes on lines 50 through 56. I know I discussed with you earlier some questions that a couple people had. I think it'd be beneficial for everybody to hear what those numbers actually mean, so we don't cause any undue concern.
Absolutely, and I will let Ms. Gardner give details, but I do want to assure everyone that we are not cutting people. Folks are not losing their jobs. I know Ms. Reed reached out last night, and that's not the case. We did a close assessment of particular projected enrollment, and based on pupil-teacher ratio, some of those reflect a few vacancies that we have, as well as the looking at LOA and EJ Sam, which we moved. They're now on one campus, so we were able to reassess that and reallocate those teachers, reassign those teachers somewhere else. I'll let Ms. Gardner go into deeper detail, but again, these are not this does not represent people who will be losing jobs.
Thank you, Ms. Trosclair. Mrs. Santani, would you repeat which line items?
The staffing changes on lines 50 through 56.
Sure. The staffing assistant principal approved by the board ratio Line 50, 55, and 61 actually coincide with each other. So by allocation, the South Side School receives 4 assistant principal and an instructional leader. We allowed the instructional leader to be converted to an assistant principal with the cost of taking the instructional leader and a clerk and converted to an assistant principal because the instructional leader, the administrator could provide the instructional support. So for finance purposes, we go ahead and subtract and re-add. So it's it's just a wash. So we have it correct on paperwork. In line 51, it says adjust to board approved ratio of a -2 staffing counselor. We, again, as Ms. Trosclair said, we took the LOA and EJ Sam are now on the same campus. So as assessing, we went ahead and eliminated an LOA position and transferred the counselor to another open spot. And we had an administrative adjustment at Barranco to assist last year with the needs of the school, which we have gone ahead and retracted. So that's the -2 there. Line 52, staffing teachers K to 12. We started this for the budget for 24. We submitted 4.5 less teachers due to enrollment, so that would be a decrease right there. We also took 7.5 teaching spots that are administrative adjustments and moved them to ESSER's funding, so that way we could have more flexibility and other priorities in the general fund. In line 53, Spanish immersion has dropped enrollment in the elementary, and so that is a reflection there. Line 54, due to just ratio and enrollment, we are negative half a PE teacher. Line 55, again, that went with the South Side with line 50 and 61. And 56, 3 custodians, because we have added square footage with our new wings and our new facilities.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. LeBouf.
I know there's been some adjustment for SPED at Middlebrook, but there has been a question about keeping a SPED para. I just wanted to see if that was addressed in here or if there's been any discussion about that, or if we. No.
Dr. Rabelais, are you aware of a request from Ms. Artigo? Do you know the grade level, Ms. LeBouf?
I do not at this
Okay,
point.
we'll look into that.
Thank
We'll
you.
get back.
Ms. Trosclair, I do know that we have several RTI paras and SPED paras that Ms. Artigo is still looking to review and see what can be done. So they may be in that situation.
Any more questions? We'll move on to item 2.3, General Fund Cost Center's proposed budgets for the 1100 series. Any questions on those 1100 series budgets? Seeing none, we'll go to 2.4, General Fund Cost Center's proposed budgets for the 1200 series. Any questions on the 1200 series? Seeing none, we'll go to, I'm sorry.
Just a minute, Matt. Let me point out to the public that if you have any questions on any of the items that he's bringing up, please feel free to do so. Please raise your hand. I'll recognize that you come up here. Thank you. Continue, Matt.
2.5, General Fund Cost Center's proposed budgets for the 1300 series. Any questions from the public? 2.6, General Fund Cost Center's proposed budgets for the 1400 series. Questions? 2.7, General Fund Cost Center's proposed budgets for the 1500 series.
This is just a general comment. I know this and you know this, but I want to make sure it's said. All of the changes that we reviewed in the first agenda item can be tied back
Correct.
to individual detail within these cost centers. So the cost center that is on the left-hand side of the projected changes for the general fund can be tied back to the detail lines within the cost center. So it may seem like we're skipping over a bunch of it, but the first agenda item that we covered was really the changes to the general fund. Everything else
This
is
is just the details.
is
yeah.
just the detail, and it's
And
largely
Mr.
remains
Richard
the
did
same.
reconcile that for us, because there was, yeah. So that is, it's kind of like a pyramid. The first thing we saw was the top, so we're just getting into the details which we want to present. It's a lot, but we figured some people might want to look at that. So to be totally transparent, we do post all those things for people to see by individual account number. I think we have 44,000 account numbers in the system, so it can get overwhelming, and this is just the general fund.
And just so you know, I still read the detail.
I'm absolutely sure you do.
Okay.
So, I did 1,500. So 2.8, discussion or action concerning a preliminary report, general fund budget. Projected revenues and expenditures, line items 50 through 56, 59 through 68, and 71 and 72 related to staff hiring. This is a measure where we ask you to approve those certain parts of the budget so that staff can start hiring people and getting teachers earlier in the season as they're trying to apply for jobs in different parishes.
Yes, and if I may add, Mr. Dugas, thank you, that we do have our job fair looking for teachers Saturday. This certainly helps us in being able to offer jobs to teachers for those positions that we know that we have. Getting teachers, I mean, it's very competitive now, and new teachers coming on, they want to hop on the first confirmed job that they're offered. So this would definitely help us put us at an advantage to be able to hire teachers in Lafayette before they look elsewhere. Thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Lechley?
I'd like to make the motion, please, Mr. President.
Sure.
That the board approves the staffing portion of the proposed 2023-2024 general fund budget summary. Projected revenues and expenditure lines items 50 to 56, 59 to 68, 71, 72 related to staffing, hiring for the fiscal year 24.
Second.
Was that a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. First of all, we would recognize anyone from the audience who want to make comments concerning the motion. Anyone on the board? If not, Madam Secretary, we'll call for the vote.
Seven for, none against.
Okay, motion carries.
Item 2.9, discussion and or action concerning early obligation release of funds. Dr. Rabelais?
Yeah, so what you see is we're asking the board to approve early obligation for our textbook funds, especially our largest content areas, ELA, math, science, and social studies. We find that if we can order early, then we no longer have to worry about the textbooks coming in too quickly before the start of school. We get them earlier, we can get them situated, sorted, and get them out to school so we're ready for next year early.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that the board approves the early obligation release of funds to purchase ELA, math, science, and social studies textbooks and consumables for the 2023-2024 school session in the amount of $5,086,019.50 as stated in the public contents section of this agenda item.
Is that a second, Mr. Broussard? Second by Mr. Broussard. Any comments from members of the audience? Members of the board? If not, Madam Secretary, we'll call for the vote. Am I missing something or just not up yet?
Seven for, none against.
Item
All right,
210.
Matthew, go ahead.
Item 210, discussion and action concerning the 23-24 proposed group insurance fund budget. Any questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Centini.
Mr. Dugas, I saw that there's a 4% premium increase. What each 0.5%, just to put some numbers to it, each 0.5% increase, how much revenue did that generate for the fund?
4% was approximately
1.4 million, right?
million total on the general fund.
On the general fund, but we only pay something in the order of 70% of that, right?
For the employee?
What 1.4 million for the 4% increase in the premium required 1.4 million out of the general fund.
Yes, sir.
But we only pay 70% of the total. 70% of the total premium, something like that.
Trish? Yes.
69%.
It goes
So
back and forth depending on, what plan you're on.
so for let's just for round numbers say we're paying 2/3 of the premium increase, so that means it's $2.1 million for the 4%.
Oh, in total?
Essential, like close
Yeah,
enough.
If you divide the 1.4 by 0.69. About 2 million.
2 million. Well, that's nice and easy then. So each percentage increase is $500,000. Am I thinking about this correctly? Like
Yeah, very good.
$500,000 into the insurance fund, but 69% of which would have to come from the general fund.
Correct.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you very much.
And that's general fund portion. Remember that grants who have people in the fund do pay their portion of the insurance. So that's the general fund for general fund employees.
Okay.
But you also have employees in Title I, in food service, in all the other, and they all pay for their own health insurance premium.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dugas.
Continue.
Any more questions on this item 2.10? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, we'll go to 2.11, discussion or action concerning proposed budget for the 23-24 2,5 cent sales tax. Any questions on that budget? Any questions from the audience? Seeing none, we will go to 2.12, discussion or action concerning the proposed budget for the 23-24 capital projects capital improvement fund. Any questions from the board? Questions from the public? Seeing none, we will go to 2.13, discussion and or action concerning the proposed budget for the 23-24 self-funded construction fund. Any questions from the board? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Centini.
I see $8.4 million. We don't have convenient line numbers on this one. $8.4 million on, this is page 3. About 1/3 of the way down for warehouse consolidation, which is a carryover project. I know we approved this in the middle of last year. It was not in the self-funded construction budget that was approved by the board last spring, and I remember the process. Are we confident that that $8.4 million is going to cover the cost of? And I'm making an assumption that this is the Walmart building.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 8.4 is actually how it works in the construction budget is we're estimating how much we're going to spend in that fiscal year. I think the actual total budget is 10 million, including the purchase. So the 8.4 is what based on a percentage of what we think we might be under project they would use in that fiscal year. So it's not the total budget. But on that question, we are still looking into that project. We haven't closed yet.
Do we think
And-
10 is going to work?
We're not sure.
Mr. Centenni, we're not confident of that. We do have the architects coming together again. I mean, we've been meeting to be able to get a more accurate figure before we make a final determination of the best way to move. So no, sir, we're not confident of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any more questions in 2.13
Go ahead.
from the public? Seeing none, we'll go to 2.14. Discussion or action concerning the proposed budget for the 2023 Bond Construction Fund, which is our fund that is building our 3 new schools. Any questions? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, we would just need a decision from the board if they would like to hold the optional meeting or not on April 19th.
Mr. President, I would humbly suggest that maybe give the board members some time to digest the budget a little more. We got this yesterday morning, I think. And then we can certainly make a decision at our April board meeting.
Yes,
Is that going to be with enough time for you guys?
Yes, sir.
Maybe we can just make this decision next week.
Sure. Dr. Aguilar?
I have one question I failed to ask at an earlier agenda item, item 2.2. Is it okay if I?
Sure,
Okay, Mr. Dugas, can you speak to row 211 on that agenda item 2.2? It's external transfers. I know what that is, but maybe just for the public to hear
Yes.
what exactly that transfer of $5.7 million, how that came about.
Yeah, that's actually an increase. External transfers is the money that we expect to go to charter schools. And, frankly, in this budget process, that was a huge issue for us in trying to balance this budget. So that is based on the projections of additional grade levels that'll be added at those schools in this coming year. We've been in contact with the schools trying to get a good estimate. Historically, we have found that about 80 to 81% of the students in those charter schools are from Lafayette. We only get charged MFP for the students that have Lafayette addresses. So not everybody in those schools are from the parish, but so we're projecting, I think 81% of their projected enrollment would be coming out of our MFP. So the state takes the state funding and they take the portion of the local funding and they reduce our MFP. So they make us gross our MFP up as revenue. Then they actually send it to the charter schools and make us show it as an external transfer. So we actually never get that money, but we have to show it like we got it and sent it, basically. So it shows up in revenue and then it shows up in an external transfer.
Yes, sir, Mr. Okay, go ahead, Matt.
So other than that, we can adjourn if there are no other questions from the public, or and we will get feedback at the April 5th meeting if you want to hold the second meeting, and we will prepare for that.
If there's no other questions, this meeting is adjourned.